Hey, my name is Sebastien. I'm one of the co-founders of Paima Studio. We're a game studio building fully decentralized games, as well as the authors of Paima Engine, which is a framework for creating app-specific rollups that leverage multiple stacks together at once to build decentralized games.
Hey, my name is Yemel. I'm co-founder of Decentraland, one of the earliest, I think, metaverse crypto games out there. Currently, I'm the executive director of Decentraland Foundation. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I'm the co-founder of Blade Games. We're a on-chain game studio, as well as we built some infrastructure to power those games. Our core product is a on-chain game engine called ZK Unity. It's a modular ZK game engine that can compresses game state changes into zero-knowledge proofs, similar to the way that ZK Rollup does. And we currently powers 4 games. Then 2 of the games are playable, so that's where we're at. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Let's start with a quite general question on the industry. It's like, why would we build a Web3 game using blockchain? Like, what's the benefits compared to just pure Web2 games?
Yeah, so I'm, somebody who plays games a lot, and I grew up on a lot of games that allowed for modability, where you could create your own Warcraft 3 maps, these kinds of things. So I really like this concept of, customizing games to my own liking, as well as I played a lot of MMOs early on, where the MMOs were community-run servers, where oftentimes the MMOs had to shut down because they didn't have enough funding, and everybody who was playing that game would just lose their accounts. So I think there's kind of a lot of interest in building a decentralized version of these experiences so you can really own your creations and have them live on forever, as well as, I think in crypto we don't have enough apps out there, and games are a cool way to build apps that are fun to use, as well as they're not super liquidity dependent, so you don't need to have a huge VC backing to be able to create a cool game. As long as you have a fun community, you can build an app and have fun with a group of friends.
Thing to add on top of that, why gaming? Gaming is a huge industry. Recently, in the past years, it has been surpassing the revenue of music and film altogether. So gaming is an interesting industry. Why Web3? I guess blockchain has a well-defined audience. So if you are building a product, understanding, or building a game, it's interesting to understand what's your audience. So you are targeting a global audience that has a sense of community, that also probably has some money, so adults. They are also early adopters, so willing to try new things. So I think that's, on a business perspective, why you choose that, because you can know the audience. And the difference between Web 2 and Web 3, I guess, for the company, not being exposed to custodianship of assets of your users, I think that's a huge benefit. If you are in your game, you can send money to another one. That may fall under a lot of regulations all around. I think the crypto enables self-custodianship and still enabling users to send money to each other through ownership of assets, as you mentioned.
So for us, building Web3 games, so initially we actually have an interesting story. So one of my co-founders actually had their one of their Overwatch account locked out because there's a partnership deal that's broke down by there's a fallout between NetEase and Blizzard back in 2022, and then basically there's like a lot of people lost their accounts and assets over those, and so we decided to see if we can put game states on chain, and then use decentralized storage for other people to have fork version if the game developer stops publishing the game, or have kind of upgraded version that doesn't make sense to the current, or like the updated meta doesn't make sense to the existing player community. They can still run like a side version of the previous one. So that's kind of where we got started. But then as time goes on, like you see the evolution of kind of progressive web apps. The recent months, you also have a rise of Telegram mini games. It also gets easier for you to build users through either a Telegram powered game or like a progressive web app based games. And then you have different infrastructures, incentives, or your own like token incentives to have that initial pool of audience if you do it like in a controllable manner. So I think that's also very interesting as compared to having to go to a lot of streamers and a lot of different kind of paid publishers in Web2 games. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, many key points here like community, openness, sustainability, and also like tokenization, I think important. But I just want to spice the panel a little bit up, like, because like gaming is kind of a hot topic in like pre-school run, and right now kind of gaming is not that hot topic right now. Just kind of, especially for Decentraland, just like curious, that was the problem later in the bear market, and also that was the most concerned problem now for the industry.
Yeah, I think right now we're kind of in between kind of tech innovations for gaming. So I think there's a lot of narratives that had a large drive in the growth of gaming. Player airdrop being the most recent one. I think right now we're kind of in between narratives, and there's kind of a growing narrative, fully decentralized games like Pirate Nations, different stacks, like obviously what the team Alex is doing, what we're doing, other teams like Mud and Dojo are doing. So there's kind of a brewing narrative that a lot of developers are kind of getting into right now. And so I think we're kind of gearing up for another bull run of this new kind of narrative, but I think right now we're kind of in between cycle.
Yeah, I agree about the market cycles. I believe the story of Decentraland is interesting. The first prototype was put out there in 2020, and it was just a proof of concept, I believe, like the first beta. And after, I don't know, a few months, we start getting into the pandemics, and suddenly Decentraland has a job to do for the world. We have like crazy amount of users doing parties during the pandemic. However, as a product, it needs a lot of work. Actually, we have been working very hard the last year building a new version of it, which we're launching in a few months. Someone is interested in getting into the alpha testing list, reach me out after this. I was in GDC this year in San Francisco. GDC is the biggest conference in gaming. I saw a lot of crypto projects like Avalanche, Optimism, present with like a huge stand and showcasing new Web3 games. I also met a few members of studios that were recently acquired by companies investing in Web3 games and actually publishing, building games on blockchains. So I believe there is a new next wave of Web3 games coming on pretty soon. Probably that's the change in the market we're looking for.
In my opinion, I think in the past 2 to 3 years, there were quite a bit of like AAA games, as we call it, just high budget games that gets funded. And then over the bear market, the team, when they do kind of user testing or then when they do like token drops, it wasn't so clear in terms of the market and the user feedback that they received. So some of the like tokens weren't designed or structured correctly, and then leading to like a relatively not like the player community not so happy type of token generation event, eventually leading to them not being able to live up to the pre-TGE hype. I think a lot of those developers are now currently realizing either you do like a super high budget game, but then you iterate very quickly and focusing on gameplay, or you focus a lot more, as people call it, kind of mid-core games where there's like strategic gameplay. You can iterate very quickly, and then you really find the kind of the sweet spot where people really like to play your games. Some of the things that like in terms of what we do internal testing is like if this feature, for example, this acceleration bundle, like if we really put this in there, do people really want to pay for it just to get a more kind of a kick out of the game? Is this something that people that really want, even without kind of the crypto feature or like airdrop expectation? So that's some of the stuff that we've been testing, and then I think the next wave will be building on top of those kind of prerequisites. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting you mentioned like tokens should be released in a controllable way, but like just curious like how how should we design the tokenization for Web3 gaming that is like people not just farming the points and like leave after the airdrop things, and also, yeah, just like curious, like, because recently there's so many like small games happening in town ecosystem, and they're kind of like clicking and like small games, and people are playing for like token. So like just curious, like A, what's your thought on the tokenization part of the gaming design, and B is like, how do you feel like in the future, like town games like this kind of tokenization games will survive, and what do you think will be the next big games in the future?
Yeah, what I've seen a lot is that because the technology for creating decentralized games right now is evolving really fast, most teams and companies are focusing on small experiences, because realistically, 3 to 4 months after they start building their game, there's going to be some new underlying tech changes, there's going to be some new engines coming out, new stacks coming out, and so people are wary of building long dev cycle experiences, and so people are focused on trying to ship smaller experiences. The problem with building a smaller experience, of course, is that it's harder to build a token that has lasting value, because the game is too simple oftentimes to really have a full cycle, which leads to oftentimes the TG either not going well or dumping shortly after. So I think a lot of this is not necessarily an inherent issue, but rather a consequence of the tech evolving fast enough that companies are often not willing to make a bet on a longer term development cycle.
Well, it's a hard question to answer like in a general manner. It depends on the kind of game you are trying to build. I don't have a lot of experience building like strategy games based on like tokens. In Decentraland, we use tokens to hold like ownership of a piece of land. So that's lasting for a long, long time. We have seen games in Decentraland that use it as a reputation system. So it's more like a tool for communities to assign like some sort of compensation of the users that are actually adding value. For example, a crew of reporters going to events and taking pictures and writing like a summary and then building like a news feed. That's all user generated, and they have their own token to reward the users. But it's more like a reputation system, I believe. Maybe you have more insights about tokenization?
Yeah, I think we definitely see a lot more interesting experiments in this cycle when it comes to not just games, but just overall consumer-facing apps. People try it different ways. Either it's pumped off on kind of creating a meme launchpad, or there are interesting cases where I've seen recently with kind of more simpler game that probably you can beat it over like 14 days or like 30 days. And then you have to go, like basically you have to go in there and then you use like in-app purchases to accelerate your like in-game progression levels. But then those money that you put in is actually a pre-sale into the token IDO. So everybody was trying to, like if you really want to get a large, if you have faith in that particular game, you can probably just put in more money. But then that actually gets created into a kind of, for example, this has a pool of like 100 Ethereum, 1,000 Ethereum, and then you can contribute part to that pool, and then it becomes a fair launch process. And then that removes part of the problem where you have like a super complex dual currency system where eventually if people leave, it collapses because no more new tokens are being bought off the market. It's just voluntary kind of people playing the game. If they want to progress faster, they pay some stuff. So that's interesting. The project doesn't hold particular like token utility. It says like there's some meme capabilities there. But then I think you can see from there is if they generate enough attention, they can probably resell those traffic into other games, and then eventually having like token buyback incentives off of those. So I think a lot more kind of games are gearing towards either a kind of a publisher model. If people are on Ton, they kind of resell their traffic, or they kind of memify the game itself, kind of focusing more on gameplay. Those are on kind of lower budget ends. In terms of higher budget ends, you really have to calculate your in-game economic cycle very well. You had to do multiple rounds of testing, like Sebastien said, like investing into a longer development cycle to get things right. So I think it kind of diverges into those two spectrums. So yeah.
Yeah, there's many points here. Just like want to push the question forward. Like, do you think like if we combine like, for example, AI plus gaming or like social features plus gaming, will it help like make the game more sustainable, or like it's just kind of a narrative?
I think for social, there's definitely a lot of people trying to experiment with stuff. If you look at things like Farcaster, for example, people trying to build like on-frame games, like to call them. I think right now none of those have really had much lasting effect. Some of them have been successful shorter term, but Farcaster is not really set up as a system to like have a game that lasts. They tend to take up your feed and then eventually kind of scroll down. So I think there's some room for more experimentation on the social side beyond just Telegram and some of these other platforms. I think for AI, it's a bit harder to do this in a decentralized way, in a way that it actually adds meaningful value to the game. A lot of people try and focus on decentralized inference so that they have some AI and everybody somehow has a global network where they do the inference for the AI automatically, and I've yet to see one of these projects really have meaningful traction. It often ends up where there's basically one company running the AI and that tends to outperform. I think there's room for innovation on the AI front when it comes not so much to decentralized inference, but rather trying to build a network of AI agents. So for example, if you have a game and anybody in the game can run their own AI agent, how do AI agents in the game talk to each other? You need to have some kind of global registry of AI agents and some kind of communication standard between these AI agents. And I think this kind of decentralization, not on the AI operation and the AI inference, but rather on the communication between these AI agents to build a more cohesive experience, is kind of a more interesting direction. And I think it also fits better in the concept of things like autonomous worlds and fully decentralized games, because for these games you can't easily differentiate between real players and non-real players because there's no one company operating the game. And so trying to empower users to run their own AI and making these AIs easily able to interact with each other, I think it's a bit more on brand for these kinds of experiences. So I think there's a lot of unexplored areas in both those fields, but obviously they're both kind of hard problems because the expertise required to solve these problems are not necessarily the same expertise as writing a game. So I think there's quite a large graveyard already of companies that have attempted these and didn't quite hit the mark.
I believe AI is an amazing tool for any company in any industry. So in the backstage is reducing the cost of like most of the pipeline in production. You can get some help on narrative, scripting, 3D modeling, like along the pipeline. I think it's really helpful. It's not replacing the team, it's actually making it more productive. And nowadays in the gaming industry, also like having live ops or downloadable content or like a continuous stream of content is also important. So having AI to power the teams behind the content, I think that's important, but not so visible. In Decentraland, also we are like a user-generated world, so we have like a lot of content created by the users. So giving that power to users, I believe it's also lowering the barrier of creators, being able to pass from an idea to actually having a scene working. That's something that AI is going to make a huge leap. We have seen some tests already that helps creating scenes in Decentraland with AI. So super excited about bringing tools to creators. And on a user level, for social gaming, I think there is also a lot of applications. For example, a automatic translation. So maybe two different people who speak different languages can interact directly, having like automated translations. Also to being able to tweak your digital persona, like voice mod being able to tune your voice. I think those algorithms running locally makes this technology available for everyone. So excited about those.
So I think for social, there's quite a bit of things to do in terms of Web3 gaming, but it applies the same to Web2 gaming as well. So for example, if you're like a medium-sized studio, leveraging like streamers in early days to, for example, if you're building a strategy game or you're like a horror game that has like streamable value, because either it's like horrors or high-stake strategy. It generates a lot of free views for your games. So projects like SideQuest. There's like an interesting project that's come out of that I've chatted with. They have just kind of a network of streamers, and then they kind of help power those newly launched games in Web3 gaming to get the right type of streamers. That's very interesting because the recent, like if you look at Manor Lords or some of the other kind of indie games that launched very successfully, a lot of the success contributed to streamers. The other thing is if you look at viral growth, things like Monopoly Go or some of the other games that like every 15 seconds or 30 seconds, you have like a in-game choice of either inviting 2 more friends to unlock a special perk, like a small perk, or not to do so and then fall behind your competition. That's something, if done well, it also generates a lot of user growth. So those are some of the stuff that we've been thinking about on the social side. On AI side, I agree with Sebastian's, like agent-based games is quite interesting. For example, like a football manager that's powered by AI agents, or any type of kind of skill-based games that are powered by AI agents. It's something that's yet to be explored. There are hackathon projects that does similar stuff in that area, but then none has matured yet. So yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Next question would be like, because there are many types of games like RPG, shooter games, and strategy game you mentioned. What kind of game do you think is more suitable to being built on blockchain, and which part is like combined together with blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen people build successful games in quite a large variety of genres, so I wouldn't say there's one genre that's specifically better for Web3 games. I will say that it depends how much of a Web3 integration you want. So for example, if you want to build some kind of FPS game or any game that has real-time action, you will have to build this kind of Web 2.5 game, because otherwise it will not run fast enough. And so I think for a lot of people trying to build fully decentralized games, turn-based games have been kind of the winning formula. So we see a lot of people building card games, a lot of people building strategy games, turn-based games. You know, these kinds of games have, or like pet simulators, have had a lot of traction. But I think there's probably a lot of like unexplored options that'll come out of ZK, because with ZK you can run a lot of the game logic locally and then send the proof of the results when you're done your session. And so you can see a lot of companies in the ZK space investing very heavily into gaming. So for example, Starknet has probably thrown the most money into it, but there's other companies as well, like Fluent and Mina, that are also putting money into gaming nowadays. So I think probably for like these kinds of fully on-chain games, we're gonna see probably new kinds of genres coming to industry, enabled by ZK.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's not a particular kind of game that you can only build that on Web3. I think depends on the game you want and what kind of Web3 integration you want to do. You can see games out there that let you take your digital asset out, and that's minted at the moment you are taking out of the company database. That's one approach that is a less Web3. And the other part of the spectrum, you are storing the whole state of the game in the blockchain. And there are so many things in between. Some other games maybe let you just attach a wallet doesn't matter which is the network, and pulling all the property you own and let you customize your experience based on the things you own. So that's kind of an interoperability approach to Web3, and the rest of the game state still lives in a centralized server. So I think it depends on your approach, and then picking which is the right technology to make it happen.
The two of you guys have covered quite a bit of in terms of game genres. So I think to add to the ZK game design space, because we started off trying to build a kind of fog of war dungeon game where you can attack into a dungeon without knowing how many monsters are in there. And then you only see like the battle rendering as well as the units left after the battle. And then you have a few turns to determine whether you extract with your loot or you continue doing so, and then you might get ambushed by other players. So I think that's much more powerful as compared to early 2023. Now you have more mature ZK VMs. You have like companies like Ingonyama building like TE, like trusted execution environment based. They built like a chess game off of like GPU based fog of war, which is very interesting. So there are like kind of, I think extraction games works very well, turn-based extraction games with a lot of high stakes. But then there is problems with kind of you're focusing on a smaller crowd of people. Then a lot of the board games, if you do like ZK with it, it's also very interesting because a lot of this is information asymmetry, and then you have like hidden information and stuff, which is also like possible to do. We have like a card game sample code base that's running on like ZK WebAssembly, which is a ZK VM. So yeah, just off of those spectrums, yeah.
Yeah, our last question is also related to your responses, like, because recently there are many like developments in terms of the infra side, like ZK space and also the chain. They're like being more and more performant, and like just curious, like which side of the infrastructure side do you think is the most exciting for gaming, or like which improvement is the most useful for you guys in terms of the infrastructure side?
I would say probably ZK is I think what most people are putting the biggest bets on, just because it enables a lot of new use cases as well as it enables scaling that just isn't really possible with other stacks. So I'd say almost every company building on-chain games right now has like a ZK strategy at this point. So I think that's probably the main one. I'm also super interested in growth in DA because right now one of the main issues with gaming in my experience is that it's hard to verify the full game state. Games tend to have, if they are market sets, have a large transaction count, and it's hard to properly sync a full game node locally, and so you end up usually having to fall back to some centralized server, and then at that point, what's the point of having a decentralized game? And you can see this not just in Web 2.5 games, but even like affiliate games, like with stuff like Mud, where you're trying to build full game solidity. If your game has a long lifespan, it often ends up just being too expensive to rerun the game state, and so people tend to do seasons where they just say, okay, at this point in time, like the game will pause and we'll do a new season, we'll reset the state to try and make the indexing fast again. And I think DA has a lot of opportunities to solve that problem through data availability sampling, where we can just sync the specific blocks and transactions related to rebuilding the state required for the game. So I think right now DA is not really being paid attention to that much in the on-chain gaming space because stacks like Optimism and Arbitrum Orbit have been, although not ideal, sufficient enough to bring something to market. But I think as stacks like Avail and Celestia become faster and more performant and easier to connect to other networks like Ethereum through attestation and ZK bridges, I think probably DA will help make running clients for these kinds of games much more accessible than before.
Well, Decentraland is a veteran project in the crypto space, so we're kind of conservative in the technology we use. We started with Ethereum to store the ownership of the most important assets, the most valuable ones. Then we launched these user-generated wearables, and those are created by members of the community and sell publicly on the marketplace and secondary marketplace. We decided to choose Polygon because it was, I believe, the only alternative chain back then that we could use for that use case, and we are still there. We have seen the ecosystem shifting a lot, and sometimes there is an interesting chain coming up. But we are very reluctant to move everything to another chain until it's really proven or is solving a problem that we cannot solve with the technology we have at the moment. I think that's the conservative part. And still looking forward for CK technology to bring new horizons. In terms of other providers or technology, we use the graph, and there is many other alternatives to indexing the blockchain, like substreams and all the derivatives of that. We use Magic Link for social authentication, so enabling a user that doesn't have a wallet to be able to have a wallet, a non-custodial wallet, through attached to one of their social accounts. So that's really opening our product to another market, the mainstream market. So I think that's important. We also use Alexar, which is a project that does cross-chain payment. So even though we have our wearables in Polygon, you can still buy it with any stablecoin in other chain. I think Chainlink is another project we use for our smart contracts and to peg some of the value of the assets to US dollars or other asset kinds. I think that's our stack. Looking forward to have something new and shiny, but it's a lot of risk as well to do that swap.
Yeah, I think what we have experienced, part of it, like back then when we were running a game on Mud, which is kind of the earliest on-chain game engine, and then trying to have 2,000 people playing at the same time. On alt layer, we had to set up, I think we had to set up 10 or like 15-ish like parallel kind of temporary rollups, like temporary bridges, the rollups that when the game session ends, you roll all the game states back to layer 2. But then we still had to kind of expand the RPC capacity quite a bit. So if we were to have like a fully on-chain game that has like a typical like CCU, CPU kind of, peak user time has like 30K or like 40K people playing at the same time and sending transactions, I don't think there's like very good rollups that's out there that can take it with like very short amount of time of preparation. Of course, investing heavily into a lot of nodes would help, but yeah. So I think that's that. Additionally, it's just wallets. I think with the rise of Telegram-based games, there's ton-based wallets, and then there hasn't been like a good social, like kind of based out of MPC or based out of smart contract wallets that can have you play the game and then store your assets in an EVM wallet with email address. So we've been trying to find that, but we haven't found it yet. So I think those, like, and with the rise of like different, plus Discord, Discord is opening up a lot of SDK last month, and then until the end of the year, they're rolling out more like SDKs to play games. So you can build, like, people can build wallets inside like Discord. Find a way to do that. It's also very interesting to unlock a lot more users and then bring them to like Web3 games. And so both Telegram and Discord. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, here's all for today. Thanks for coming and have a good day.